Let's go ahead and get started. I am thrilled today to have my customer and colleague Jennifer Weber joining us for this session to talk about Salesforce on SupportLogic. Salesforce is one of our best customers, and we've really enjoyed working closely with them over the last going on almost 2 years now, I believe. So, just kind of for the session today, we're just going to talk about that experience and how Salesforce has been successful in driving results using SupportLogic, and how it's really enabled their organization to have successes that maybe they didn't have before, right? So what we're going to go ahead and do, there's a poll as well in the poll chat. So if everyone would like to go over to the poll option, feel free to give a response to the poll. We'd love to hear from you on when you're having a rough day in support, what's your go-to snack of choice? While you go ahead and do that, I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction for Jennifer and I. So Jennifer is a highly accomplished professional serving as the Director and Chief of Staff to Marketing Cloud Support at Salesforce. Throughout her career, Jennifer has been instrumental in driving operational excellence and optimizing support services. Her expertise spans team management, process improvement, customer satisfaction, and cross-functional collaboration. As Director and Chief of Staff, Jennifer plays a pivotal role in aligning the technical support team with organizational objectives and ensuring seamless execution of initiatives. Her dedication to excellence, commitment to the customer experience and the support experience, and ability to drive impactful change make her a valuable asset to the Salesforce team. So, welcome, Jennifer. Thank you for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Max. I'm a Senior Customer Success Manager here at SupportLogic, and excited to take you through this success story with Jennifer from Salesforce today. So to start off, Jennifer, I know you've been at Salesforce for 16 years now. Can you tell us a little bit and tell the audience a little bit here about your journey at Salesforce and how you started and how you came to eventually work in the role that you're in today?
Sure. I came in through the ExactTarget acquisition, actually. So I was originally with ExactTarget as an account manager. So I kind of started out on that side of the house and moved over to support when ExactTarget was working to revamp their support team and kind of get that started. So I never pretty much been in support ever since. So about 14 years of the 16 were in support. And I generally bounce back and forth between delivery focused roles where I have teams that are actually providing the support to the product, and then over to more strategic or executing kind of roles like I'm in now, where I've worked on different projects and things to improve our overall processes or align things across the team. So kind of keep flipping back and forth, like both, and then just kind of go wherever the new challenge is, basically. So
that's great. And were you was Salesforce the beginning of your career in software and technical support?
Yes. So I before Salesforce, and this will sound completely out of left field, but I had 11 years at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. And while it sounds completely different, which in some ways it was, basically what I specialized in there was helping to launch new teams and solve logistical problems through new teams that could handle it and develop new processes to roll out that would make things more streamlined for the customers. So it's not really that different, even though it sounds completely out of left field to go to technology after that. But yeah,
having had a completely different career before I got into SaaS and technology, I can definitely relate. So, so maybe can you talk a little bit about what about support are you passionate about? Why technical support?
So I think I've developed a passion really for the customer experience and making sure people have a really good customer experience. One of the things specific to Salesforce that I'm passionate about maybe is we have a lot of different products, and so a lot of different people that specialize in a lot of different products, which makes it much more of a challenge to kind of make sure an experience is consistent across all those avenues. So while our operations team develops a lot of the processes and works on a lot of the, really logistical parts of it, a lot of what I do is help make sure the rollout of that is executed across the organization, the part of the organization I work in, and making sure that we are all doing it the same way and not going off in different directions as we bring those initiatives into the organization. So I really like the idea of having the customer be able to ask a question about any of the products they've gotten and get the same experience. Like, they shouldn't have the different experience with different questions on different products. And so being able to be a part of fixing that, I think, is good. I also just like a challenge of what if we did this, and trying to help make that a reality. So sometimes aggravates people in operations when I constantly like, what if we did this? But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I like the challenge of taking something that's not working great and making it work great, or helping to make it work great in whatever way I can. And that's kind of how I got to where I am here now. So
awesome. So, I mean, that'll be a good segue into in what we're going to talk about. But before we get into that, let me ask one more question with regards to what you just said. What do you, in your experience, what do you find is the biggest challenge in building that uniformity across customer experience in support organizations?
Yes, I think for us it is that a lot of the products and features that we have are different, and because of some of the acquisitions, some of them are even on in slightly different environments, or they are meeting different challenges that customers face and things like that. So the way they approach support might be a little bit different from a troubleshooting perspective. And so taking different ways of having to troubleshoot different features because just of how they are, and making processes that are one size fits all across all those places, I think that's kind of the challenge that we try to rise to, making sure that that experience is consistent, even though the products inherently have differences about them. Like Marketing Cloud is very focused on email and communications. Sales Cloud is very focused on helping the sales motion move forward. Service Cloud helps you meet the customers when they're having issues and or scheduling and things like that, and getting them where they need to be, the right resources to the right place at the right time. And all of those getting something that works in all those different scenarios can be a challenge sometimes.
Awesome. Yeah. So then, to segue into the topic for the day, why don't you tell us how you got involved in SupportLogic?
Sure. So I am the chief of staff for Catherine Sullivan, who is at Salesforce and works with primarily the Marketing Cloud, MuleSoft, and Tableau teams. And in that role, one of the things she asked me to do, she said, "We're using SupportLogic. I don't know if we're using it as well as we could." And so I stepped in to try to just look at what is SupportLogic doing, and where can we. I had a little bit of experience of it because one of my teams was the first team to help pilot it. And then I hadn't had as much direct involvement in it, but then I stepped in, started looking in there, and immediately noticed, I'll touch on this a little bit probably in the other slides, but it was a very good predictor. It's not a one-to-one relationship with our customer satisfaction, but it is a very good predictor of what's going to happen a week or two out. And after I started showing teams that, I started, kind of guiding people along. We should be looking at these things to make sure that we're reacting quickly and turning cases around. Within a couple of weeks of that, we very quickly proved that it did work. Like, instead of CSAT maybe taking a little wave or whatever, it was staying more stable because we were intervening early, and we could tell that intervening early was making a difference. So we ramped up our concerted effort to do that. And that just kind of started it, because then we just started asking ourselves the question, what if we use this to see if our trainings are effective? Like, if we think one of the problems is maybe that we're not explaining it well, what if we do a training for the team on how to convey things a little bit better? And what if we use the sentiment signals to see, did that help confusion? Did that help frustration? Like, are we saying in a different way and it helped? We noticed that it did, so we've like moved that motion on, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in here. But the first thing was just digging in to see, are we really maximizing our use of it? And we weren't. Just kind of doing a few ad hoc or acknowledgments wasn't really working as well as when we really kind of aligned everyone and went forward. We saw a much better improvement in being able to react before we normally would have, like, for lack of a better term.
Awesome. So why don't we talk a little bit about what this does look like, right? You reference a number of kind of distinct roles here. So can you talk a little bit about, what these individual roles mean and how they play into how you're using SupportLogic?
Sure. So the first one is swarm leads. They're a very key part of this. We switched from tiered support to swarming support almost 2 years ago. And so we actually probably a little over 2 years ago. And the swarm leads have a group of people that are their home swarm, and they help facilitate making sure whenever someone raises a question that the right resources are engaged, that the ticket's moving along, and that that the request eventually gets closed and they have the support they need to finish the ticket. Swarming gives us an opportunity to reduce the time to resolve on cases, and it gives us the opportunity to improve CSAT. Where we brought SupportLogic into this equation is swarm leads would set up alerts for their home swarm, so that usually about 12 to 15 people, and they might get an alert on an escalation predicted or on follow-up request or confusion, frustration. We picked a few key signals to start with so that they weren't looking at everything. And they go in, make sure there's already a swarm raised. If there's not, ask, should they raise a swarm? And then they act proactively. So they're doing kind of the on the ground work. The program leaders might lead like our signature program or our chat program, things like that. And they're looking at SupportLogic. How is the program doing on a sentiment basis? Are there things that sentiment's uncovering? Am I low? Are my alerts a little bit off in certain sentiments, and do I need to dig in there and find out why that is? And then leadership as well is using more trending information. Like, are we trending up? Are we trending down? If we're trending up in alerts, what do we need to do? Why is that? Do we not have enough people on a certain area? Do we have people that we need to get better trained? Do we have an issue going on that we need to look at? And so they're kind of evaluating that trending information, again, digging into it and saying, is there something else going on that we need to address beyond just that one ticket?
Awesome. So it sounds to me like what you're talking about here is almost the between these roles, the intersection of the tactical all the way up to the strategic, right?
Yes.
Awesome.
Very, very much. The swarm leads are definitely very tactical. And as you get up to the leadership team, that's where it's definitely a lot more strategic.
Awesome. Okay, so why don't we talk about, I know that alerts have been a big part of the rollout and the success and much of what you were just talking about. Let's talk a little bit about the individual signals and why these are important and the value that each of them is providing to you and your teams.
Sure. I mean, we obviously look at likely to escalate because we're trying to prevent some escalations. But along with that, we've noticed that some of the others even show up earlier than likely to escalate sometimes, or can alert us to something that's relatively simple to fix. A good example is follow-up. If someone's pinging us and asking us for a follow-up, sometimes it'll come up as likely to escalate, sometimes it won't. But what we've been able to catch is maybe someone's out unexpectedly and the manager hasn't gotten through reassigning all their cases yet, and there's someone in there that's hot and really needs attention quickly. That follow-up alert is a thing where we can go, oh, we need to move this one right now, and we need to get that over to a new person. So the action on that might just be reassigning it to another engineer who can pick it up and give them a call back right away. But we can intervene before the frustration sets in that case. If they're just saying, I need a call quickly, there it is. So follow-up and call requests, we use it a lot for that. Frustrated and confusion, we look at those because we want to stop that in its tracks in the case and hopefully maybe re-explain it or work with them in a swarm request, in a swarm, to say, how can we phrase this a different way to help? But we also look at it as, if we're getting a lot of frustrated and confusion alerts on a certain topic, do we need overall better enablement for the team? Do we need better enablement for that one individual? Maybe they're newer and they haven't gotten enough training on that one particular thing. Is it just in general confusing and we need to pass that information over to product to see if documentation can be updated or whatever? We take those signals and we action them immediately, but we also look at them in aggregate to say, how can we improve? Like, are there things we can improve about what we're doing on a daily basis? Are there things we can better prepare the engineers for so they're doing it? We also look at, soft skills. Is it just how we're saying it? Are we just saying it in a way where it's being taken a little bit different? How can we do that a little differently? Lack progress, pretty much the same as follow-up and call request for a lot of reasons. Churn risk too, that's one where we will a lot of times, we don't get a lot of results on churn risk, which is good. I mean, we wouldn't expect to. But when we do, that gives us an opportunity to raise it up to our sales team, for example, and be proactive and say, just so you know, this person's really frustrated and they're saying a lot of things that make us think that maybe it's not just this case. You might want to give them a call. You might want to look into it. So we can kind of reach beyond the confines of support and allow the broader account team to step in if they need to.
That's great. What has been the response? Right, SupportLogic is, in reality, it's just another tool on top of all of the other tools that your support managers and leaders and teams are using. Right. What has been the response both early on and over time from the team, especially when we're talking about something like alerts that are pinging them regularly, that kind of thing? How is that? What's that journey been like for them, and how have you gotten over some of maybe the inertia of getting them to use and leverage a new tool?
Very fair question. I think we were really heavily focused on swarm leads in the beginning. In the beginning, that was the bubble where almost all the action was happening. Like, it was them and pretty much like me and 2 or 3 other people looking at the longer trend. At first there was a little bit of, this is a little bit scary. Can we get this going? And what we did was really focus on how do we convey what this is actually accomplishing and share the numbers with people. And so through some time doing that, people realized the impact they were having. And we also shared a lot of, look, we know that this is heading off CSAT. We know this is lowering TTR. Here's what we see. And here are the trends. We did this many acknowledgements. This is how much this went down. People started to really buy in and to focus on that. And it really worked. I mean, and so as we did that, leaders started saying, I want to get access to, and I want to do this. And we grew it out like that. Yeah. And that's really been the biggest success we've had, is kind of showing them exactly where it went and how we were able to get to that spot.
That's awesome. And have you seen, right? I imagine as individual kind of end users have seen that it is having a positive impact on their own KPIs. Like, has that, as they've kind of seen that, has that taken some of the pressure off of driving them to use it? And have they just kind of embraced using it in that way?
Yeah, I think they really have. I think as they've seen the success, they've really seen, oh, I'm making a difference. And they've seen, as I'm even not just acknowledging, but as they're seeing, oh, as I've been doing this, there's actually less alerts to look at because I'm also giving feedback that, oh, this one's kind of a false positive for us. Yep. And so it's driving down the amount of times it's alerting. And so I think that's been like super helpful to drive that. We started with swarm alerts, as this says, just setting up the key attention and sentiment flags. And the swarm leads would review them, they'd action them, dismiss the false positive. We gradually saw the number of alerts we were getting coming down, which made it even more manageable. And they were like, hey, that actually works. And leadership would monitor those trends and also provide feedback. And what we really did was communicate to the team really intentionally, this is what we're using it for. We're not just asking you to do this because it's like another thing for you to do. We really, really need help.
Did you find that, I mean, with regards to kind of setting up these key alerts for these flags, what was from an operationalization perspective, like what was the expected action that the teams were to take when they received these alerts? Like, was there a specific process you asked them to follow when they were notified via, negative sentiment or a call request or something of that nature?
Yes, so they get Slack alerts, and we would ask them, please go into this and go in and look at the case. Is there a swarm request that's already been raised? If there is, check and see if it needs help. Are there other experts we need to bring into the swarm request to move everything along? If there is no swarm request, should it have one?
Right.
And the answer is not always yes, but most of the time it is yes. Like, should I raise a swarm request? Or is it something where they're out and I need a manager to intervene to like say, here's where we'll sort of take this case and give it to another person. And so it kind of depends on the alert. And we focused really heavily at first on just responding to the swarm request that was in there and doing whatever we needed to do to take care of it. Sometimes people would do that and not necessarily be good about going back and acknowledging it. So our acknowledgement didn't always track with it. But as that got better, we would start focusing really heavily also on how going back and acknowledging it so that we could track, is the acknowledgement doing really well? Like, is the acknowledgement actually translating to this? And so we've had people more and more doing that. And that's been super, super helpful. And because we can kind of see where this is what we did, this is where it happened.
Right.
Before we knew this is what was happening, and we could tell that they were getting alerts and actioning them because there were comments in the case and things like that. But it gave us a definitive tie-in to say, is that really what's moving this needle?
Yeah. So you're talking about measurable outcomes in a sense, right? Yeah. You mentioned a little earlier about how the sentiment being a leading indicator of dips in CSAT. Could you drill into that a little bit more for the audience here?
Yeah. So what we noticed, our time to resolve, like say our time to resolve on a certain product area is 7 days or 5 days, something like that. What we would see is we would start to see a dip in sentiment that wouldn't show up in CSAT until kind of like almost 2 weeks later. And so, I mean, because if say where our average case time to resolve is 6 days in a particular area, it takes 6 days for it to close and the CSAT to come back. So it makes sense. When we started seeing dips and we were reacting within days of the dips because of the instantaneousness of the alerts.
Yep.
We started seeing that instead of maybe going from 4.8 to 4.5 with that dip, we might still go from 4.8 down a little bit, but it was like 4.75 or 4.7. Right. And so we really smoothed out those curves a lot. You don't get rid of all of it. Sometimes people are super frustrated and it's beyond just what's going on in the case, or that's not enough to save it at that point. I mean, that happens.
Yeah.
But it did smooth out the curve. And so what resulted is a lot of times we didn't even go below our goal. Like if our goal was 4.5 or 4.6, it might go down a bit, but it didn't go down as much. So it enabled us to have less of the volatility in our KPIs. And I mean, and in the customer sentiment. I mean, that's just the reflection of the customer sentiment, obviously, which is the main goal. But it's nice to be able to see that is leveling out how the people feel about their case and everything that's happening.
No, that's great. That's great. That's great to hear. If I remember correctly, I mean, I've been working with you for well over a year now, probably almost a year and a half. If I remember correctly, and you talked about it, one of the key focuses at one point was call requests, right? Mm-hmm. And that customers, tended to ask for a call request at a certain point in the case life cycle. Can you talk a little bit about what you did with that specific signal, and maybe how you guided engineers or agents to what you guided them to do based on those?
Yeah. So as we went through the life cycle, a lot of what we would do, we would start to let them know what it meant. And we're actually kind of in the process of doing this again, because we're just on the verge of expanding some of this access out to engineers so they can see their own cases.
Yep.
So it's great to tell them to do that, but it's not as helpful as telling them why. And so a lot of what we started doing was realizing, okay, we've had them in here for a long time, and we've never actually told them what our strategy is. And to be honest, I don't know that we had that solid of a strategy like in the early days. We were still learning how to use the tool, and I don't think we had realized the power of everything that we could do. And so as we got further along, like when we're going into March, and I'm starting to notice that we have these trends that we definitely can see and that we're affecting them, we started telling them, we're using this to see how the customer feels about this and how they've reacted to this, and to see if intervening early changes. This is kind of what the sentiment score means. Like the sentiment score is kind of a composite reflection of this. So when you see it pop up in your case, that's what that score means, like, and how it filters in. Some of what we're telling the individual engineers is the translation of, if you see this sentiment score, it pretty much means this. You're pretty much on the right track. If you see this one, you should start to get worried. Like, you should start to like if you're deciding, should I talk to this person or this person first, you might want to talk to this person first, just to kind of keep the sentiment level. You probably have another 5 minutes to get to that one. So it helps them prioritize two issues that might otherwise be the same.
Right.
I just think the education of that is really helpful. And one of the things we did with Swarm Leads was we actually built a training that was, how do we kind of want you to set up your SupportLogic? I mean, it's not rocket science, but just kind of saying, this is how we generally set up our filters.
Yep.
This is how we've been telling people to do it, so that everyone kind of is doing it the same way, which makes it easier when something new rolls out to say, this is how we want to do it. And guess what? You've already set your stuff up the same way, so it should work fine. And we've talked through not just how to set it up, but this is what we do. We're looking at it to intervene for sentiment, but we're also looking at it for, are our product enablement sessions going well? Like, can we look at that product area and see the sentiment for cases in that product area are getting better?
Yep.
A good example, we had one product area where it was always kind of struggling just a little bit. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. And we did a series of deep dives with our technology team. And after the series of deep dives over the course of a month, we kept watching it. And over the next 2 months, the sentiment just like went way more positive.
Yeah.
And so we were actually able to go back and share that with the technology team, going, you took all this time and helped us out with these technology trainings. It wasn't a waste of time. Look what happened.
Right.
People are much happier about your product. We can tell from the cases. When they're logging cases, they're walking away happier because we can help you. Like, we can go in and tell them what they need to know. And it's not like, wait, let us talk to product, we're not sure. It's just really been able to kind of enlighten it. Sharing it with other teams, what we're doing, has gotten a lot of interest. Like, being able to go to technology is another example. Being able to go to them and saying, look, we're asking for your help in this area. And oh, by the way, here's the trend of sentiment in that area.
Right.
It has a whole different impact than just going in and saying, we need some help.
Yes. Because you're bringing them the empirical data, right? You're bringing them, you're backing up anecdotes with data. And when you're talking to product and engineering, right, they're all about, they need to see that and hear that.
And
right?
they love the data. Like, we go in there and they're just like, this is great. And we also take in there and say, look, this is really trending better. Like, you release this new thing and it kind of fixed the old thing. And it's, this is so much better now. People are really, you can tell they're happier about it. And so it gives them kind of something to show kind of the process of what they've done.
That's actually a really interesting point, right? Because it's not just about finding the negative, but it sounds like it's also about highlighting the positive, highlighting where things are improving, right? Sounds like you've leveraged it a little bit in that way as well.
We have. And I mean, just from the positive alert standpoint, one of the things we looked at after we did an initiative with a pilot for a new soft skills class. And one of the things we looked at, we did look at negative trending, but we also looked at the helpful trending. Helpful was a great tag to see, or sentiment alert that was coming up to see, hey, that person, the 5 people who went through this training, their helpful sentiment went way up after this training. And everyone else was the same.
Wow.
So it was really empowering to be able to say this actually had an impact, because they were trending along at the same number forever. It went way up. And if I look at kind of the control group, they stayed flat. So obviously, if we send more people through this, the expectation is hopefully we can get everybody getting this better. And, we really would rather have everyone say, thanks, that was really helpful, not thanks, I'm totally confused.
Yeah. That's great. That's great to hear. So, one of the things that, right, is always so important when we're talking about support, and especially in this climate where costs are top of mind, right? A lot of organizations are cutting costs left and right, and so measuring results and measuring outcomes are really, really important. And so I moved on to this slide. Can you talk a little bit about those results at scale, in the sense at scale? Like, what have you've achieved across the org as a result of that?
So possibly one of the ones we're most excited about. When we started our initiative, so last March of 2022, to really kind of focus in a concerted way on this, one of the first things we noticed was escalation reduction. And it didn't just drop a little bit. We cut our escalation rate in half. And that trend stayed through the entire year, all the way through now. Like we have been significantly below goal for most of the last 12 months, and we've been below goal the whole month, but some of the months like very significantly below goal. And it all dates back to the month we started using this. There are always other initiatives in play with escalation, but there's been we can definitely see that in the month that we started doing this, escalations went down. And I have a graph later that'll show that, so I will share that as well. The other one is the enablement wins, being able to really look into the data on different parts of the ticket that we have. So a product and topic that might be listed, or a feature, being able to look at that granular level of like the feature, for example, and say, every case we get in this is a little bit low. There has to be something enablement wise, or something we're missing here. Like there's something here we need to fix, I guess is what's the best way to say it. And being able to then go deliver some targeted trainings on that, or build something better into onboarding so people come out already better equipped on that, has been really powerful to be able to do. And to then see it backed up with how, new people's sentiment is better on those products when we put it into onboarding, or we did all these trainings and now the sentiment in that whole feature area is better. Being able to see that connection has been really helpful. And then customer sentiment as well, sharing that with other people, whether it's our own operational team, like this endeavor you put out is really helping. This is how the sentiment's been tracking. This is how the training goes, sharing with product. We've shared it with some of the sales teams and stuff when they've asked us. We've been able to share specifics about their customer, look, their customer sentiment has really been improving as these things have been happening. And so that's been a really powerful story to share. And people are always pretty interested about, oh my gosh, I can't believe you can tell this. Because the difference between this and CSAT is not every case. It's just the people who respond. But with sentiment, right, we're seeing it across everything. So the story becomes a little more powerful there. When we're seeing things that people might not otherwise report on. They may not even tell us they had a bad experience.
That's great. Yeah. One of the things I wanted to also ask you, and this is something that comes up with a lot of our customers, right? Often there's an expectation that every, say, escalation prediction you get needs to be accurate, right? How do you manage expectations in a sense with your team around like the efficacy of this, right? And the workflow around maybe like the importance of some, but disregarding the other ones in a sense. Like how have you kind of handled that conundrum almost?
Yeah, I think we've really focused on, so you get like 10 alerts at once, skim them and look for the most egregious, address those first, and then kind of look at the others. Do I need to do anything on this? And we really have encouraged people, please be sure you're dismissing ones that maybe shouldn't be coming up. And for the people that are skeptical, and there always are some, we've come back and shown, look, some of the people are doing this really consistently, and look at how much our alerts dropped.
Yep.
And here it is. Yeah. So the actual alerts dropped, but we had no change in the escalation. It still was down. So it wasn't not predicting them. It was just not predicting some of the ones that were maybe false positives, or maybe because of how it was worded and something in our product, it was catching stuff that weren't really escalations. They were referring to like maybe something in the product. And it learned that over time. You can see very definitely where it learned it. Like about 6 months in, all of a sudden we saw a big sharp dip in the number of stuff we got, but we still kept actioning them. We were actually actioning a higher percentage of them because there were fewer of them. Yep. And our escalation rate continued to decline. I mean, I think there's a little brief uptick in October, but side note, October is one of our busiest months of the year. So that always happens without it. A little tiny uptick, but it was a tiny uptick. It wasn't a big swing. So we were really happy with that. It just we can show this now to people and say, look, nothing else changed. You just trained it. You taught it what it didn't need to show you. So
awesome. Let's jump ahead a little further. Talk a little bit more. You touched on it a little bit, but maybe let's expand a bit on the enablement improvements that you were talking about.
Sure. So we have done a few things, deep dive trainings I mentioned before with certain product areas. The soft skills training, we've reduced some frustration and negative flags due to better wording. what we've done is taken some of the things, actual alerts that we saw in SupportLogic, and used them as examples in those classes for, look, we could probably reword what we said right before this. And so we've actually been able to kind of take some of those alerts, give it to the soft skills team and say, we need to kind of, these are things happening a lot. We need to phrase these a little differently. And then skills applications. One of the things we do see in SupportLogic is we might see coverage gaps. Like sometimes the dip in sentiment is because maybe someone went on vacation in a skill that's relatively small. We don't get a lot of cases in it, so there's not a huge team coverage. And what we see is, why all of a sudden did sentiment dip? We start digging in, and it's because suddenly a bunch of engineers have a few more cases than usual because maybe there are too many people out on PTO.
Right.
So we've gone back and said, we need to be a little more careful about moving people back into this skill to cover for people who are out. We didn't do a great job of that this week. Let's fix that. And so we can course correct and know that on the next like spring break timeframe or summer timeframe when a lot of people are out, we just need to either watch that more tightly or bring people into cover. And so it has allowed us to see a lot of those kinds of things.
That's great. So resource allocation, in a sense, has kind of become a little bit easier because you're proactively being notified that cases aren't necessarily getting responded to as quickly as they might, or something of that nature.
Correct.
Yeah. Awesome. Let's see here. Let's jump ahead to this. So what's next, in a sense, with SupportLogic? I know you're going to talk a little bit about the case review is something you've used a little bit, and I'm excited to hear you talk a little bit about how you've leveraged that and how that's been beneficial.
Sure. So we're actually getting ready to use that a little bit more in a more ramped up way, so to speak. But we have been using it to kind of take, as we're going through, you can flag them for future audit or for future review. And we've been using that to, this is a case that we definitely need to dive in a little bit more on and maybe follow up with the engineer directly, flag that. And it gives us a place to mark a lot of comments, and it has a lot of good leading questions that encourage us to kind of look beyond just the surface. Like, did we do all these things should be considered. What we're working towards is using the newer tool that has a little bit of an AI function as well to take that up to a new level. And so we'll be looking into that and moving into that space. We've also launched the internal training that helps align all the teams. I mentioned that one earlier before as well, using SupportLogic on key indicators and goals, and also kind of aligning everyone to kind of the why behind what we're doing and how we're using it in maybe some different ways. And then just increasing focus on sentiment. We now include sentiment in most conversations. And I think more and more, like if we don't, we actually hear, how's the sentiment on that? Like we're starting to get people asking us if we don't include it proactively. And so I think we're changing that mindset a bit to hear it. Before it was always us bringing it up and saying, here's the sentiment. You guys should look at the sentiment in addition to all this other stuff. And now when we don't have that, the other teams we usually share it with are like, you didn't tell us the sentiment. Is it better? Is it the same? So making that kind of a habit with everyone, but continuing to evaluate that after key events and changes. We're making it a regular goal as an outcome we want to see as we're approaching things.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear. Another question that I wanted to ask you, right, with the current economic climate, right, and every support org trying to do more with less, and where does, from your perspective, SupportLogic fit in to that kind of method into that climate right now? Like, where does it fit?
I think it really helps to prioritize. Some cases might be doing okay, and being able to kind of just really intentionally plan which cases might need a little bit more attention. Intentionally plan I didn't know if this needed to be swarmed, but maybe it does because they're getting really aggravated or they're really frustrated, and maybe I need to see if I can move it along a little faster. That intentionality, I think, is a big piece of it, and knowing where there might be pockets where we can improve more, where there might be places where we need to alert the account team that, this person's really frustrated. It's really highlighting a lot of those things so we can stay ahead of those paces and hopefully be a part of people not attriting, or people deciding to renew or just expand their footprint with us and things like that. I think making sure people are happy with how their case is being handled is a big piece to a lot of that. And so it allows us to have that view and kind of know which cases might be at risk for kind of not being in that space yet and work on those.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay. So we've talked a lot about customer experience and the impact of this upon that. Is there a component of this from your perspective that that is helping with the engineer experience, the manager experience, like the way the teams are able to collaborate? Do you see a benefit there?
Yeah, I think we're just getting into. We really just expanded it out into managers a lot. We had a few select managers in there, and now we have quite a few all the managers in it basically. And so we're really exercising that muscle a bit now that we haven't done as much over the past year. So that's going to be a new thing over the next year, is the increased power of that, but also who's responsible for what in a bit. Like the swarm leads have kind of been doing most of the stuff in there. And now with the managers using it as a coaching tool and being directly in it, it removes some of the need for swarm leads to pass things over to the managers. They're already in it. They can already see it. And so redefining some of those roles and stuff will be one of the things we'll need to do as we expand kind of how we're using it.
Oh, great to hear. What are you most excited for then about, let's cover two things. Like, what are you most excited for about, the future of, say, what you can potentially do with SupportLogic, but also I'd love to hear what you're excited about for the future of support in general.
Yeah. So for SupportLogic, for that piece of it, we've been the only team using it for quite a while. And so now we've expanded it out. We were already kind of expanding it out to 2 other teams, and we're getting them, in the groove, so to speak. And we're now have expanded it out to all those global support teams. So it's been fun kind of bringing everybody along on the journey and kind of sharing what we've already learned. So I'm excited about that piece of it. We're all in the same place and doing kind of the similar things. For support in general, I think a lot of the things happening in the support place are really interesting right now. Like a lot of teams are not just Salesforce, but a lot of teams are moving from tiered support to swarm support, focusing more on collaboration and resolving things quicker because you're bringing all the resources to the same place rather than passing them up the chain to the next place. That's a really interesting motion and has been successful for us so far. And it's really interesting to see where different companies are taking it. I also think the word of the day, how AI plays into this whole mix, right? Because there are a lot of potential uses for being able to serve up content for the engineer that might be really unique questions, so then they can find the information faster and they don't have to go looking for it as fast, being able to get that in the customer's hands a little more quickly. I mean, from that all the way up to different chat implications of being able to handle multilingual cases and things like that in a way that we haven't before. I think we're just scratching the tip of the iceberg on a lot of the things that it can do and where we can use it. And that will be a really interesting journey to see over the next couple of years. Where does that go and kind of what are the parameters around it? I think everyone's still learning a bit in that space, and that's definitely as well. So I think that'll be interesting to watch grow.
Absolutely. And to be honest, our founder and CEO Krishna is going to be talking about quite a bit more of this tomorrow in our roadmap session around Gen AI. But is there anything else that we haven't covered that you think think with regards to SupportLogic, or that you think other support organizations need to hear just about how Salesforce is delivering support and what other organizations could do to improve their own their own support that they're providing? Anything else come to mind?
I just really think look beyond just the alerts, really. I mean, look into it do different cuts of the data, look into by support level or by severity, look into it by product and topic, or if you have product and topic or product area or feature, whatever different teams have. You can get some really interesting views in there. And what you can do, what you can do with that, coupled with going and digging in and kind of just looking at some sample cases in those areas, or looking at the ones that's pulling up as alerting, can really tell you a lot about where the pockets are in a way that it would take you forever to do it with like keyword reporting or something like that, because you'd have to sift through every single case. Right. And it really kind of pinpoints, rather than going, oh, this one's good, being able to say, I know I have a problem here. Now I need to figure out what that problem is. It really helps narrow that down. And I think that's been a very powerful thing. Just being able to take that and know where to dig deeper. I may not necessarily be digging deeper in the SupportLogic app, but I know where to go back to our Salesforce instance and dig, and it saves me a ton of time because I'm digging very specifically and I already know what I'm narrowing down on. And in some cases, I know key phrases to look for because the same people keep saying roughly the same thing. And I can go in there and really just kind of look at, why are they saying this? What's driving this? Yeah.
Awesome. So we actually have a question or two from the attendees. So I do see a question from Chandan. Chandan is from Sienna, which is another one of our customers. Specifically, he's asking, what has been your ROI on the use of SupportLogic? And I know we touched on that a little bit with regards to just outcomes and escalation rate. And you may not be able to share figures like that, but how would you kind of answer that question, if not in the dollar value?
Yeah, so I can't answer it from the dollar value perspective, but I can say that a lot of the ROI we've seen is a lot of it's in the reduced escalation rate. With a reduced escalation rate is definitely less frustration from customers, which translates to less frustration saying I want to attrit or I'm a churn risk or those kinds of things. It's less things feeding into that. So there's definitely there's an ROI there. The other piece is really streamlining and allowing us to focus on things we know are case problems without having to wait for them to escalate. So it kind of ties the escalation rate, but we're also addressing issues earlier in a focused manner because it's telling us where to focus our attention. And so I think from an efficiency standpoint for leadership, it takes us right to the problem and we don't have to do as much digging. And so it's saving the managers a lot of time that's really harder to quantify than say quicker throughput. But the end result too is a lot of times to be honest, quicker throughput is also part of the equation because if the managers are saying, oh, we need more resources on this is really frustrating or it's really stalled based on the sentiment, that also speeds up the flow of the case. So I think we're seeing it really in things like the faster time to resolution. It's contributing to that increased customer CSAT, largely because of the reduced escalations, in my opinion. But all of those things together make the customer experience better, which helps with customer retention and loyalty and things like that, hopefully. So I think that's where we're looking at the biggest ROI is how it's helping us be proactive instead of reactive. We're not waiting for the problem to come back at us. We're going to the problem where it is.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Another question we have is, there's a lot for other organizations that are starting to use SupportLogic. Where do they start from your perspective? Like where do you focus your efforts first, given the power of the tool and everything that it can do?
Yeah, I think when we focused it on one role and started with that role first, I think that really helped us because we weren't trying to manage 4 different ways that people were using it. We had one group of people using it in the same way. And to be honest, what we really did was focus in the first couple of weeks on a couple key teams and just asking them to be really, really intentional about how they were using it so that we could learn more about it. We told them what we were trying to do. We're trying to see how much we can move the needle. Can you just be really focused on this? And what that also built was evangelists who could then answer other people's questions. And so as we dug in, that's a key thing. The other thing that I think was very good, and this is not just to reflect on me, but with 1 or 2 people having ownership. So one of my counterparts, Sean and Michael, the 3 of us were very focused on it. And so we were building a lot of knowledge about it. And when other people started using it more heavily, they could come to us with questions and we were a resource point. And we were also a place to say, oh, that's a good idea. We should look into that. And we would take it a little bit further. Having kind of a champion for it is very helpful. If everyone's trying to implement it at the same time and you just have one person responsible for the admin of it, I don't think it's as good as having a couple people championing it and being able to answer the questions or to be able to take questions back to your account team at SupportLogic and say, we're trying to do this. Should we be trying to do this? Or
right.
In some cases, the answer was no. And sometimes, can we do this? And they would say, that's really interesting. We would like to know more about that. So I think having a champion allows you to kind of get those answers and ask those questions a little more easily because they're all funneling through one or two people.
Terrific. Yeah, terrific. Thank you. So thank you, Jennifer. That's all the questions that we have from the attendees. It's been an absolute pleasure having you at the conference today, speaking with our customers, and as well as other support organizations who aren't our customers. And it's been a pleasure working with you over the last year and a half. So everything. Thanks again.
Yep. Thank you. This is great. And I obviously look forward to continuing to work with you.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining the session, and we hope you enjoyed it. All right.